If you've been stressed out lately and you think people are your problem, and they're causing all of your stress, you're probably right. But how do you solve that? Well, you don't have to change everybody else. We can just let love dominate us. Jesus didn't really have a problem with people, even though they hated him and they disagreed with him and they argued about him, and he lived in perfect peace, perfect harmony. He was happy. He was filled with joy. He healed. He blessed. Why? Because the love of God dominated him, and the love on the inside of him was stronger than the hate and the anger that was around him. And you can be the same way. Can you see why it's a better way? It's not really recognized. We don't champion love. We don't champion the compassion of God, but we should, because it's the most powerful force on earth. It's greater than hatred and fear, just as much as God is greater than the devil, as much as good is greater than evil, as much as light is greater than darkness. Love is more powerful than the negative forces that surround you, that work in the lives of your friends, relatives, and your enemies. And the love of God is in you. Let me give you one more verse before we go to our story. 1 John 2. Verse 10 says, "He who loves his brother abides in light. There's no cause for stumbling in him. But he who hates his brother is in darkness and walks in darkness and does not know where he's going, because the darkness has blinded his eyes." That is a great benefit that comes to us as we walk in love. Things become more clear to us. Maybe you're confused and blinded right now because you haven't allowed love to dominate the situation you're in. But if you'd begin to pray over the situation and focus your thoughts on the love of God, what would Jesus do? What would the love of God do in this situation? Begin to walk in love toward, he says here, he who hates his brother is in darkness. Well, what's the opposite of that? Loving your brother, loving your neighbor, loving those around you. And as you would begin to move in that by faith, and as I said, you don't have to feel it, just begin to practice it. Begin to speak love words. Begin to pray love prayers. Begin to focus your attention on God's feelings and God's view of that person, and allow love to enter your heart. Then many of the things that confuse you, the questions you have, I believe would be answered. We have not taken advantage of this force, this great and mighty force of love in our world. And I'm going to get back to this later in our teaching because it's so important in the months to come. But I just wanted to cover part of it as we get into how Jesus related to some people. And the first person that we're going to look at that Jesus related to was Nicodemus. Nicodemus was a religious man. And so in John chapter 3 and John chapter 4, we have two different people that that he encountered out of the blue seemingly. But it's so insightful as we see how Jesus interacts with these people. It gives us so much teaching, and it helps us to view the world through different eyes. And I know that it'll do for you what it's done for me. But it's just important to know so you know where we're going. We're going to talk about Jesus as he deals with religious people or a religious person, Nicodemus. And then we're going to look at Jesus and see how he dealt with a total heathen, sinner, totally outside the family, the woman at the well. And I think you're going to be surprised. I don't want to blow the punchline, but let me just say, he didn't deal with either one of them in anger, nor did he deal with them out of fear, but he allowed love to dominate the conversation, and he converted them both. And isn't that a better way? I mean, rather than make our point and win the argument and beat people into submission to doing things the way we want them to do it, wouldn't it be better to win a convert? Wouldn't it be better to speak to the heart and not the head, and speak to the spirit of a person and win them over to Christ and let their life be changed from the inside out? I'm concerned that the church has become very natural in their thinking, and we've tried to approach things from a natural standpoint, and that's why we're frustrated, and that's why we're not having an impact like we want to have. And it's tormenting to be trying to make a difference and then failing. If we would do things the way Jesus did them, I believe we'd see more results. Not only that, we would be happier and more filled with joy in the process. So let's go to John chapter 3. We're going to be able to introduce this today, obviously, and then we're going to go on with it in future programs. So you don't want to miss that. John chapter 3 verse 1 says, "There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews." So he was a man that was religious. He was a leader. He had a lot of influence. He was an important man. And this is the first thing that happened that kind of irritates me. And when I read this, I thought, I'm not sure that I would respond to this man the way Jesus did, but I want to. I want to get to that point. So here's what happens. This important religious man, a man of the Pharisees, he knew the Bible, and everybody respected him. Verse 2, this man came to Jesus by night. Well, that right there is just irritating. And I want to relate this man to people in your life or people in my life that we deal with all the time in the world. First of all, he didn't have enough respect for Jesus to come meet him in the daytime. And there are commentaries that say, and I choose to believe this, that he met Jesus by night because he didn't want anybody to see him with Jesus. Now tell me, is that not irritating? What if somebody said, hey, I really like to meet with you. I've heard what you're doing. I'm interested in you, and I want to talk to you, but I don't want anybody to see me. So could you meet me in secret? Could you stay up late and maybe at, say, 2 o'clock in the morning, we could meet in a private place so nobody knows? You know, I wouldn't have much time for a person like that. That just bothers me. And see, that's the anger that comes in. There is natural tension between us and a lot of people in this world today because of things like this. We don't like the way they think. We don't like why they do what they do. We don't have much patience with them. And if there's one thing that's going on in our world today, it's just we don't have a lot of tolerance for each other. As I said the other day, used to you could make a little mistake driving and people would make room and they would be okay with it. But nowadays, man, they are so ready to honk and wave, and I think they're waving. I don't know. My mom's not a great driver, and she said, I thought everybody was waving at me, but I realized they weren't waving. They were giving an obscene gesture. So these things happen, but it seems to me like there's just less and less tolerance. And even being a preacher and a man of God, and I should have higher standards, but if somebody approached me like Nicodemus approached Jesus, I think I'd tell him, you know what, I don't really have time to meet with you. I've got a very short window here. Jesus had 3.5 years to fulfill his entire ministry, and he certainly didn't have to spend his nights meeting with people that were ashamed to be seen with them in public. But oh, God's so good, isn't he? God's a God of love. And as we go through this story, everything Jesus did to Nicodemus was motivated through love and compassion and patience. And he really changed Nicodemus's life to the point where we hear about him later in Scripture. He was truly a convert. But he wouldn't have even gotten that far if Jesus had gotten offended because Nicodemus was too proud to meet with him in public. Isn't that amazing? Don't you love God? He's willing to do so much. People say, well, can you just meet me halfway? God was willing to go all the way to meet us. He loves people, and he wants us to share his love for people. It dissolves and eliminates the torment, the anger, the fear that would otherwise fill us toward situations in this world. What a much better way. I'm glad Jesus met with Nicodemus, even though I'd like to defend his honor and I'd like for him not to waste his time and energy with people who are ashamed of him. I'm so glad Jesus showed us the better way. Jesus showed us how to relate to annoying people.
In this new series, you will learn the keys to getting your joy back and enjoying life, even in these challenging days. Visit gregfritz.org to download the MP3s or watch the streaming videos for free.